Some muscle cars may look like high-speed monsters, but not all of them live up to the hype. What do we mean? Well, often than not, the focus is on the fast, the furious, and the adrenaline-pumping machines. However, some cars look the part, but don't exactly perform the part. With aggressive styling and bold designs, these cars seem ready to dominate the streets, until you step on the gas and realize you might have been sold a dream. In this video, we're taking a closer look at the slowpokes of the muscle car world. From surprising performance letdowns to the reasons these cars didn't live up to their speedster aesthetics, these cars look impressive but fail to deliver the power you'd expect. Some of these might just surprise you. Sorry in advance for how disappointing the performance of these hot girl fit cars are. They serve the looks, but definitely not the speed. 1973 Ford Mustang Mach 1. First on our list is the 1973 Ford Mustang Mach 1. This vehicle had all the visual cues of a high-performance muscle car, but when it came to raw speed, this stallion was more of a workhorse than a racehorse. By 1973, the golden era of muscle cars was in decline. Emissions regulations, rising insurance rates, and the oil crisis all took their toll, leaving the once mighty Mustang struggling to keep up. The base model came with a tiny 2.8-liter V6 producing just 105 horsepower. Even the optional 5.0-liter V8 barely managed 140 horsepower. The most powerful engine available, the 351 Cleveland V8, produced only 156 horsepower, a massive drop from the 300-plus horsepower models of the late 60s. The Mach 1 might have had the looks of a track-ready beast, but its 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 9.7 seconds and quarter-mile in the mid-14s to low 15s were far from impressive. For a car that screamed performance, it sure left a lot to be desired. Ford had no choice but to lower compression ratios to meet emissions standards, and with added weight from new safety regulations, the Mustang was now a sluggish version of its former self. It still looked like it belonged on the racetrack, but in reality it was more suited for a casual Sunday cruise. Of course, we have more hot girl fit cars in store. Wait till you see the next vehicle. 1974 Dodge Challenger. At the number 2 spot, we have the Dodge Challenger. It was supposed to be a pony car killer, a rival to the Mustang with intense American power. But by 1974, it had become a victim of the same performance-choking regulations that slowed down the Mustang. At first glance, the 74 Challenger looked like it was ready to tear up the streets with its broad, powerful grille and optional shaker hood scoop. But under the hood, things were disappointing. The base model had a 2.6-liter inline-4, producing just 105 horsepower. Yes, a 4-cylinder in a muscle car. Even the 5.2-liter V8 struggled with just 150 horsepower, while the top-tier 5.9-liter V8 only managed 245 horsepower, far below the 400-plus HP monsters of the early 70s. The Challenger's bold design promised speed, but as bold as it looked, it could only manage a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 10.1 seconds and a sluggish 17.5 seconds quarter-mile time. It looked the part, but its performance told a completely different story. Once again, the blame fell on emissions restrictions, heavier safety regulations, and rising fuel prices that forced Dodge to prioritize efficiency over muscle. Despite its aggressive stance and bold styling, the 74 Challenger had lost its bite. Speaking of lost performance, let's move on to a car that should have been a menace on the tracks, the 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454. 1972 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454. Coming in at number 3 is the Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454. This ride had everything a muscle car needed: massive displacement, hood stripes, and a menacing presence. But in 1972, it became a perfect example of how government regulations and changing priorities could cripple performance. This car was packing a 7.4-liter 454 cubic inch V8, one of the largest engines in muscle car history. But thanks to lower compression ratios and emissions restrictions, it only produced 270 horsepower, a sharp drop from the 365 horsepower just a year earlier. Despite its massive 7.4-liter V8, the Chevelle SS 454's 0 to 60 mile per hour time of 7.1 seconds and quarter mile in 14.6 seconds were underwhelming for a car of its size and reputation. It was a far cry from the speed machine it once was. That might sound decent today, but in a car that weighed over 3,800 pounds, it just wasn't enough to keep up with its past reputation. The industry's switch to net horsepower ratings in 1972 made things look even worse on paper, making the Chevelle seem like a shadow of its former self. It still looked like it could dominate a drag strip, but in reality, it was starting to fall behind. If you've enjoyed the video so far, kindly give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Now, if you thought the Chevelle had it rough, wait until you see what happened to the 1974 Dodge Challenger 440. At number 4 is the 1974 Dodge Challenger 440. This car was supposed to be a thrilling powerhouse. After all, it had a massive 7.2-liter big block V8 under the hood, but despite its looks and muscle car heritage, it failed to deliver the knockout punch that enthusiasts expected. Just 3 years earlier, the same 440 engine had made 370 horsepower. By 1974, it was down to just 240 horsepower. The Challenger 440's 0 to 60 mile per hour time in the 9-second range and a 14.8-second quarter mile were disappointing for a car with such a muscular heritage. In simple terms, it looked menacing but lacked the speed to back up its look, even though the reason was the same story. Emissions regulations, insurance hikes, and the oil crisis forcing Dodge to tone things down. Not every muscle car surrendered to the 70s crackdown. Some rebels still brought the heat, refusing to let regulations kill true muscle performance. We covered these legends in our video, 12 Rebel Cars the 70s Couldn't Stop. Go check it out. Speaking of big muscle cars that couldn't back up their looks, let's talk about the 1972 Chevrolet Camaro SS 396. 1972 Chevrolet Camaro SS 396. The fifth spot belongs to the 1972 Camaro SS 396. Now, this vehicle should have been a monster. It had a 6.5-liter big block V8, a sleek second-generation Camaro design, and a fierce stance. But, like its competitors, it fell victim to the muscle car downturn of the 70s. Just a year earlier, this engine had made 375 horsepower, but by 1972, that number had dropped to just 240 horsepower. Speaking of things that dropped, the Camaro SS 396's 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 6.8 seconds and quarter mile in 15.3 seconds were a letdown for a car with a 6.5-liter V8. Stricter emissions laws forced Chevy to detune the engine, while the shift from gross to net horsepower ratings made it look even weaker on paper. Added weight from new safety regulations only made things worse, hurting its acceleration and handling. The Camaro still had the look of a street-dominating muscle car, but when it came time to perform, it just didn't have the punch it once did. Let's give a hint about this next car, the original muscle car. 1974 Pontiac GTO. The sixth spot belongs to the Pontiac GTO. This was the car that started the muscle car craze. But by 1974, the mighty GOAT had lost its bite. It still looked the part with its intense front grille, bold graphics, and sporty stance, but under the hood, things were far from impressive. Gone were the swift Ram Air engines of the late 60s. Instead, the base model came with a 5.7-liter V8, producing just 200 horsepower, far from the numbers enthusiasts were used to. Even the optional 6.6-liter V8 struggled to make 230 horsepower. This was a massive drop from the 400-plus horsepower monsters that once defined the GTO name. The GTO's 0 to 60 mile/hour time of 9.4 seconds and a 16.5-second quarter mile were a far cry from its glory days. Once the king of muscle cars, it had become a shadow of its former self, struggling to live up to its high-performance image. The industry-wide switch from gross to net horsepower ratings made things look even worse on paper. Despite its fierce looks, the 1974 GTO was no longer the street terror it used to be. It could still hold its own against some of the other detuned muscle cars of the era, but it was clear that the glory days were coming to an end. Up next is a car whose name creates an expectation of fast action. Let's find out who. 1975 Plymouth Roadrunner. At number 7, we have the Plymouth Roadrunner. This was once one of the most fun and affordable ways to get serious power on the street. It had muscle, attitude, and a no-nonsense approach to performance. But by 1975, it had fallen victim to the same fate as the rest of its muscle car brethren. On the outside, it still had that aggressive, wide-bodied stance, the bold Roadrunner decals, and a shaker hood that screamed performance. But when it came to actual speed, the numbers told a disappointing story. The standard engine was a measly 5.2-liter V8 producing just 150 horsepower. Even the biggest available 7.2-liter, 440 cubic inch 5.8, once a dominant force, had been watered down to 230 horsepower. The Roadrunner's 0 to 60 miles per hour time of 8.0 seconds and quarter mile in 15 seconds were disappointing for a car of this caliber. It still looked fast, but of course, its acceleration told a different tale. It wasn't just emissions regulations that ruined the Roadrunner's speed. The car had also grown heavier due to new safety requirements, with massive bumpers that added weight and killed aerodynamics. With a not-so-fast acceleration and quarter-mile time, the Roadrunner was no longer living up to its high-performance image. The car still looked fast. It still carried the attitude of a classic muscle machine. But when the light turned green, it was clear. This wasn't exactly a speed demon. If you thought the Roadrunner's downfall was sad, the once mighty Oldsmobile 442 faced an equally disappointing fate. 1976, Oldsmobile 442. Coming in at the 8th spot is the Oldsmobile 442, which was once a muscle car powerhouse. Its name originally stood for 4-barrel carb, 4-speed transmission, and dual exhaust, a recipe for pure, unfiltered performance. In the late 60s and early 70s, the 442 was a force to be reckoned with, packing high-compression big blocks that could send tires screaming in agony. But by 1976, the numbers no longer told the same story. Under the hood, the standard 5.7-liter V8 wheezed out just 170 horsepower. Even the larger 6.6-liter engine barely managed 250 horsepower, a far cry from the 450 cubic inch beasts of earlier years that pushed well over 350 horsepower. The 442's 0 to 60 mile per hour time of 14.7 seconds and a quarter mile in about 20 seconds were embarrassing for a car that once dominated drag strips. It ticked the boxes for looks. For speed, however, it left the group chat. It still looked bold with its flared fenders, rally stripes, and signature split grille. The badges still carried weight, and to the untrained eye, the car screamed muscle. But in reality, the 442 had lost its edge. The car that once dominated drag strips was now being outrun by smaller, more efficient cars. The 442 had always been an underdog favorite in the muscle car wars, but by 1976 it was clear that the once mighty muscle machine had become just another slowpoke in disguise. We are getting close to the end of our list, and up next is another slowpoke, but this time it's from the Mercury brand. 1978, Mercury Cougar XR7. We are almost at the end of the list. At number 9, we have the 1978 Mercury Cougar EXR7. In the 1960s, the Mercury Cougar was Ford's more refined alternative to the Mustang, offering a blend of performance and luxury. But by the late 70s, the Cougar had transformed into something unrecognizable. It still carried the striking long hood, short deck styling of classic muscle cars, but the performance had been stripped away. The problem? The Cougar had abandoned its muscle car roots in favor of becoming a personal luxury coupe. Under the hood, the base model came with a lethargic 5.0-liter V8, making just 134 horsepower. Even the largest 6.6-liter V8 option barely squeezed out 166 horsepower. These numbers weren't impressive. The Cougar XR7's 0 to 60 mile/hour time of 13 seconds and quarter mile in 20 seconds were painfully slow for a car that once blended performance and luxury. What's that saying? All that glitters is not gold. They definitely had a point. The XR7 was packed with plush interiors, wood-grain dashboards, and velour seats. Great for cruising, but terrible for performance. It had grown heavier, softer, and slower, a far cry from the nimble, high-revving Cougars of the late 60s. Sure, it looked fast with its hidden headlights, sharp lines, and rally wheels, but on the street, it had no bite. The Cougar XR7 was a victim of the times. The muscle car era was fading, and manufacturers were scrambling to make their cars more fuel-efficient and luxurious. Unfortunately, that meant performance was left in the dust. Let's take a brief trip down to Europe to see what's in store for us. 1975 Ford Capri 3.0. We are wrapping up this video with the 1975 Ford Capri 3.0. The Ford Capri was often called the European Mustang, thanks to its sleek fastback styling, affordable price, and sporty performance. The top-tier 3.0-liter SX56 model was marketed as the performance version, and with its flared wheel arches, racing stripes, and distinct stance, it certainly looked like a muscle car. But the performance was underwhelming. The 3.0-liter engine produced just 138 horsepower, which wasn't nearly enough to make the Capri the fire-breathing performance machine it pretended to be. The Capri 3.0's 0 to 60 mile/hour, time of 8.1 seconds and quarter mile in 16.4 seconds were underwhelming for a car marketed as a performance model. It was more of a beauty on the tracks rather than the beast it was expected to be. To make matters worse, by the mid-1970s, tightening emissions regulations sapped even more power from the engine. What was once an exciting, punchy sports coupe had become a shadow of itself. It still looked quick, but things were no longer the same. The Ford Capri 3.0 remains an icon in Europe, but as far as muscle cars go, it was more show than go. The 1960s and early 70s gave us some of the most legendary muscle cars ever built, but as emissions laws, fuel crises, and safety regulations tightened, these once mighty machines began to lose their touch. While they still carried the aggressive styling and road presence of true muscle cars, their engines told a different story. These slowpoke muscle cars looked the part, but when it came time to bring on the speed, they simply couldn't deliver. Some of them would eventually make a comeback, but for a time, they weren't what they used to be. We've come to the end of the video. What do you think about this list? What car resonated with you the most? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in our next video.